Good morning. Let me flip the camera because I know I look beautiful, but my environment looks prettier. Out walking the dog this morning, listening to something from man, Poor Man's Podcast, and you know, he's commenting on this whole B Simone and her other friend and their podcast and what they said about Martin Luther King. Real quick, I saw this and, I don't think I was really triggered when it actually happened. This is one of those things where it's just like, this is quote unquote normal. I'm not surprised by the commentary that these women have because they think perception is more important than reality. And the worst thing about this is that we could show them everything in reality that actually molds their perception or changes or affects their perception. And they won't do anything to act on the things that could affect their perception in reality. They go on to affect the perception. So they go on to affect the perception and not the reality, meaning you're pretty much putting a lipstick on a pig type deal. And the thing is, with the body positivity movement and things like, I'm a fat fuck, but I'm not gonna, there's a reality to that. I just woke up and my body hurts. And then the first thing I think about is some fried chicken that I have in the fridge. I'm about to decimate that motherfucker. But the reality is, it makes it hurt when you wake up and stuff like that. Like, you don't want to wake up like that. So it's like, okay, you got to get back in the gym. You got to go ahead. You got to go work out. You got to walk more with the dog and do all this other stuff, right? So I'm not missed on my reality versus my perception. The perception would be, hey, you're eating good, or you're eating and you're getting food and stuff like that in you. But the reality is, it's like, what is the food that's getting in you? And men can look at this, and some people and women could look at this as well. But it's when we start to look at it, because there are some men that are so focused on their perception that they don't do what's necessary to actually affect or change their reality. They don't do what's necessary to actually put themselves in a better position in some way, shape, or form. This is what kind of gets me. And I got to watch where I step here, because this is, the area where my dog, does his number two, or does her number two. So I call it the killing fields. But I'm never out here, so that's why I let her do it over here. But, people are so focused on perception. They're so focused on, making things look like they're good or look good. So when you see a B Simone or, the other woman that's on there, or a lot of these women that are on Instagram, they have all the clothes, they're traveling, they're doing all these trips and so on and so forth. And then every so often you see one of those skits where they're talking about how they're single, or they're commenting on skits where people are single. They're in these spaces, whether it be the divestment movement, some type of singles chat or something like that, where they can actually be one with one another, and talk about how they're single and why things aren't working out for them, so on and so forth. And this is that, like, the point I'm making is this all makes sense with their response and the way they talked about Dr. Martin Luther King and the things that they said. Give me a sec. Oh, goodness. Oh. Sitting high in the high country. But this makes sense with what they said and how they live their life. What is how do they affect their reality so that they can also focus mainly on their perception? How can they put themselves in the best position, whether it be like, not paying this, or focusing on other things, or getting brand deals or something that would get them money in their pocket, go for the bag, so on and so forth. I mean, the whole get the bag culture is perception. I'm right here, dear. The whole get the bag culture is perception minded, because I've talked about getting the bag before and how the bag is just filled with a black hole. It's a void. It's emptiness. You put things in the bag, things don't come out. Things don't stay in the bag. They just go off into nothingness. So you have to constantly fill the bag, right? So that means you really, you constantly fill the bag, and all you do is focusing on putting things in the bag, stuffing your face full of X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth. And it's actually just a void, and you're trying to fill something, but that's not, it's not really fulfilling. So you always have to get the bag. You always have to keep going. And you rarely, if ever, stop. You rarely, if ever, think about, hey, why am I doing this? Why is this, you know, why is this something that I feel is necessary for me to go on? So when you see these women, again, getting back to the point here, but when you see these women, you know, talk about these things and you know, talk about these things in such a way, or have this commentary where they're like, you know, looking at Dr. King and disparaging, I want to say disparaging his name, but, you know, talking trash about him. You know, this is something that I've heard from, what's it called? Even Dr. David Carroll, right? Rest in peace. And he said things like this before in the past, but he's read the book. You know, he's gone into all of these things, you know? So I would take his word for it and his thoughts on it, because even he said he would have respect for Martin Luther King and what he's done to a certain extent. But he would say, hey, listen, you know, you guys are looking at this guy, and there are better role models out there. There are better people that have done it, quote unquote, better, cleaner. But we look so much at a man that can actually speak and, you know, somewhat make us, quote unquote, feel good. And like his basis was, we look at somebody that can, quote unquote, make us feel good and come up with a good speech, rather than people that have done other type of works. Anyways, that's what Dr. Carroll would say, or to some extent, like, would say something like that. These women, I can't believe that they've read this. I can't believe that they read the biography of Dr. Martin Luther King. I can't believe that they've actually looked into his works. I can't believe they've actually researched his past and things like that. They just heard, hey, he cheated on his wife, but he did so much for us in terms of, you know, black people in America, especially at that time. And then, of course, you know, son of an immigrant like myself, or son of immigrants like myself, who came into this country later on, and you know, and what's it called? And enjoyed the fruits of the labors of the civil rights movement. So something like even Dr. Martin Luther King, I could say, hey, listen, man, you know, I could separate the two. Listen, there's things you do with your dick, and then there's things you do with your actual brain and your body and your actual influence and so on and so forth, right? I could separate the two and say, hey, you know, he's done a lot. It's perceived that he's done a lot for us. So something like that, I'm not going to go after. I'm not going to talk about, because it's like, he's a better man than me, and I would never do it. And I could never, you know, what's it called? I could never, you know, do the same things that that man has done. So when I hear somebody like B. Simone and then her cohort, and the crazy thing is her co-host, the crazy thing is with her co-host, she kept pushing. You heard it. Like, she wanted to force it. She wanted B. Simone to be forced into saying what she was saying, and then B. Simone capitulated, right? And of course, you know, this stuff is discussed beforehand, so it's not like she didn't know or anything else like that. So I'm not saying B. Simone just didn't know this was going to go on. I will say, though, that, you know, the way this woman was talking, her co-host, I was looking at it, I was just like, yo, she keeps pressing this. Like, she's wanting her to kind of, quote unquote, go off, because B. Simone is B. Simone. And this brings up another point, is like what women will say or do to actually down their, you know, their companions, their, you know, the people that they're with, their friends, right? They will force them into thinking a certain way. This is why you see or hear women, you know, they get, okay, thank you. Sorry, I just got a text message. This is why you see people, you see women do certain things where they're like, yo, why did you do that? Like, you would never do anything like that. And then you find out she talked to her friend or something like that, right? And that's the thing that happens. That's the hive mind that has been talked about so much from people like, or the Borg hive mind that Obsidian has talked about so much. But then you start to, you know, you get into what B. Simone is saying, and I'm just not surprised, back to what I'm saying originally. I'm not surprised by this. This makes sense with what they say, because they have to say things like this so that they can actually disparage men. So they can actually do the separation of a man. And like, you know, women will say, hey, listen, you know, women can separate their, you know, their vaginal needs from their actual psychological and other needs. Why is this dog running like this? Hey, get off my paint job. You know, they can separate their you know, their needs for their vagina and their needs for the provisional needs, or like, you know, their wanting for provision and other things, right? They can do this. But then when a man is a good father, he takes care of his kid, you know, he's always there. This is why women, where they say, hey, listen, if you don't want me, you can't have it. You can't have the kid. Because when they look at a man, they really look at a man as one thing, right? And if they, or they look at a man as a list of things, right? Maybe 10 things or something like that. And I won't list out the 10. It's just an arbitrary number. It could be 3, it could be 2, right? But for the man to actually see their kids, they have to check a certain box. And it's weird because it's like a double standard, right? So if they check everything on the emotional side, the guy is good, but then he could be shitty to the kids somehow, some way, right? And the emotional side also checks the vagina side, right? So that vagina side has more priority. This means that, like, you know, the women was like, they will prioritize their vagina and their needs and wants of their vagina over the needs and wants of other things in their lives. Not saying just their kids, but other things in their lives. So they'll, if the guy meets these criteria for the vagina, they go with this guy. You know, I can change him. He has potential. I think he could do better, and he means so much to me, right? But then if the guy checks all the boxes for being a father and so on and so forth, then somehow, some way, there's like ducks going in over there. Somehow, some way, yeah, that sucks at 3x zoom. Somehow, some way, that disqualifies him, or even with all of those things met in terms of him being a good man, being a good father, being there for his kids, you know, over providing, over showing up or what have you, you know. If he doesn't, you know, meet her vaginal needs, then boom, that box is not checked. Therefore, he's an invalid person, right? But then on the other side, you know, as long as the emotional needs are met, he can do all those things. He could do worse than those things. And that's the crazy part. You know, men get disqualified for things that have nothing to do with the child, or they get disqualified for not stroking the female ego. So when you're seeing this, you know, when you're hearing B. Simone and her co-host go off and say this stuff, and it mostly was her co-host. I just don't know the chick's name. But when you're seeing how these women go off about this type of stuff, and they start saying all this, like, you know, garbage, it's just like, oh, yeah, that makes sense that they would think that. Because Dr. Martin Luther King, in their eyes, because he, quote-unquote, cheated on his wife, you know, and I say, quote-unquote, like, air quotes, cheated on his wife, because some people say, hey, listen, this has been refuted, even if you read it. But then it's also talked, you know, in other books where it's talked about how he's, or it's, I've heard it, you know, where they, you know, it's talked about how, you know, he was really into white women or some shit like that. I don't fucking know. But I'll let that go because I haven't read this shit either. But at the same time, like, if he's done so much for us, I mean, there's some things where I'm just going to be like, hey, it is what it is. And then that guy's, he's gone. He's been gone for a long time, for decades now. So, anyways, I guess that I won't belabor that because I don't have a strong footing in that. And I can there's other people that can talk about that. That is not my forte. But when I hear B. Simone and her co-host go in on Dr. Martin Luther King, it makes sense that they would think that because this is how they actually treat other guys. You know, this guy is X, Y, and Z. He's not doing this, but he's like, or, you know, this guy's X, Y, and Z. He's not doing this for his kid, but somehow, you know, he could be, he's a good father and he tries and he has potential. But then the other guy is, he's doing great. He's a great father. And then he's somehow a fuckboy. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, this duality, this dissonance, or this cognitive dissonance when it comes to how we look at how men are looked at and how men are actually treated and valued. Like, this is such a problem for me because, where's my dog? Clena! I gotta find my dog. Sorry. Klonoa! Oh, there she is. All right. She probably was under the truck. This is such a problem because now these women, you could see the actual value of that these women have, or what these women value, and how they see men, you know, like how they actually value men, how the ego has to be stroked, and all these things need to be true before they can actually say, hey, listen, I can love or like this man for who he is, and even I can weigh all these things and see which side they lean to. I can weigh all these things evenly, and they're not even. Anyways, I won't go on any longer because I'm starting to a little bit lose the thought in my mind, and I think I'm just rambling on at this point, and I've already stated my point and proven it, or not proven it, but stated it for other people to talk about it if they wanted to, or take it in. As always, I appreciate you. This video is probably 5 minutes longer than it should be, probably even longer than that. But at the end of the day, you have to look at, I look at what she said and what her co-host said as par for the course. This is normal. This is how they value us. This is pattern recognition. This is a part of the whole pattern recognition, is also looking at the weight of how would you say it? Female desire? The weight of the emotion versus provision, and how that weighs out. Emotion weighs 2 to 3 times more than provision, because you could provide everything but not provide anything for a woman emotionally, and you're considered a fuckboy. You're considered a person that's possibly, you know, a molester or worse or something like that of your child. I was watching something about that last night, where this guy got pretty much put up on charges for molesting his 2-year-old daughter, and you know, he was treated unfairly and almost hurt and put through a lot of trauma and pain because his wife, I guess girl or whatever, or baby moms, didn't want to believe him, even though she knew that he probably wouldn't, or she had a feeling that he wouldn't do something like this. Anyways, with that being said, let me get out of here. There's so many different things that would prove my point, or would be evidence to my point. All right, peace from high country.